My name is Oliver Henry. I work for Jamieson Smith, Shetland wool brokers, and this is the story of my 50 plus years in Shetland wool. Last year we dealt with the wool, the sheep, the origins of the sheep, and the sorting and grading of the wool. Alongside that, in this company has been, since 1968, has been the development to get a sustainable price rather than going to, say, an auction, was to turn the Shetland wool into product. So initially in 1967 I was taken on for the summer. I was 67, which is it's a long summer. We handled most of the wool then. The wool here was graded and sorted, and then we would sell it on to local companies. There was about a dozen local companies. Sadly only two left, Jamieson Spinning and Anderson and Company. There's companies renowned throughout the world, and we supplied the sort of Shetland wool for the Everest expedition in 1953, where they wore Shetland jumpers knitted by Edie DeVoe. We had about a dozen companies, mills and textile manufacturers on the mainland, notably Hunters of Brora. Hunters of Brora were in the Highlands and Sutherland. They were the main buyers of Shetland wool and the main suppliers of Shetland yarn since 1901. So they were the main outlet for the wool we bought. In order to keep me employed fully, in 1968, this company, the owners, decided to do some of the yarn from the wool they bought. We started with 5 shades, and that was woolen spun at Hunters of Brora. We had a lot of wool, and that 5 shades was brought in on cone. When we started that, we had a small shop here in the wool store in the North Road. We also had a very vibrant hern industry, and in the summer months we were surrounded by the hern industry here in the North Road. They would come in and they would buy yarn because on a rough day they would see the Shetland ladies that worked on the hern stations knitting. So they would leave Shetland in the winter months, say September, October, and they would go away home, and they would want to keep knitting. So we actually started direct mail in 1969. We started with 30 hern workers, mostly Scotland and the north of England. So that was word of mouth spread, and so the business grew, the mail order business grew. But we had a lot of local manufacturers who would buy yarn on cone, and so it gradually went from 5 shades, and this was one of our very first shade cards, and we had 5, 6 different weights, and this was our very first card. That was this one. So the business grew mainly through word of mouth, and the locals were still knitting a lot. But into the 1970s we saw the arrival of the black gold, the oil, the knitters. They could earn a lot more by going to the oil industry jobs. The council started employing more people, and so knitting sort of went on the back burner. We had to compensate for the loss of trade due to this, so what we did was we started with a designer, Gladys Amidro. This is a book here. We started a single ply yarn, and that yarn was spun at Hunters of Brora. It was a single ply, and it was knitted into shawls and the scarves. And what we needed was design, and that's where Gladys Amidro came in. We needed to market that, and so we put those designs in magazines such as The People's Friend, Women's Weekly, and in here you can see Gladys's designs. This built up into a massive trade for us. Started mid-70s, went into through the 80s. Gladys produced the book, Shetland Lace by Gladys Amidro. She never said that it was traditional, it was her own designs. 1984, 85, we lost our old manager, Gilbert Johnson, and this is a design that she did in his memory. So it was a case of working with her design. I think in all she produced about 27 designs for this company, and she put it in a book form, which was printed by the local printers, Shetland Lido. So this actually not only helped the single ply lace, the two ply lace, it also opened up a marketplace for the other yarns, the jumper weight, the double knitting, the heavier weights. So we were on our way to not depending solely on wool, but onto knitting yarn. That, as I say, that carried on into the 1980s. The mid-1980s, we were very fortunate to fall in with a company called Rowan Travel, and they had textile tours. These tours came from all over the world, Japan, America, Canada, Europe, and they would send up a well-known designer, and people like John Allen, Kath Fassett, Debbie Bliss, Alice Starmore, and I got to know some of these people, and this was a very important stage for this company. Textile tours, I would give a talk on the wool, the sheet, the croft and the knitting, and it actually led to more business for the company. The wool price still overall was quite poor. We handled, as I say, about over 80% of the wool club. It's this company's, as it is today, it's this company's responsibility to market Shetland wool. So we had to come up with various means of doing this to try and encourage the lesser grades of wool, the heavier Shetlands, the crossbraids wool. We had to come up with some marketplace. There was absolutely no demand on grades 3, 4 and 5. In '92 things changed. An old chap came into the wool store, like Tom Balfour. He said he wished to enlist my help, and I said, what do you want to do? Make tattered rugs. Tattered rugs were historically what the crofter's wife would make, her own design, sort of vibrant colours, and it was initially to put on the bed, and its later life it ended up on the floor as a mat. And what Tom wished to do was to create a modern rug. We worked with a company in Dewsbury, a spinning mill, and I identified that wool in the I think it was the end, towards the end of '92, I accompanied Tom to the NEC in Birmingham, one of the biggest carpet fairs in Europe. We went there with 2 Shetland hand-tufted rugs that he got made in Halifax. And what happened from there, I met a lot of interesting people. In '92, we decided to try and set up a process in Shetland. We also got some carpets made for us down in Halifax. And what we discovered after '92 was there was more interest shown in these lesser wools. Perhaps somebody had been at Birmingham NEC and saying, what a good idea, and bought Shetland wool. Well, that's what I believe, the poorer grades. So that really was a case that we would take the rugs that he made, we'd show them off here. I would attend Islesborough Summer Exhibition 2 nights a week, and we built up a bit of trade. Through the 90s, towards the end of the 90s, I was trying to run the carpet company, working for Jamieson and Smith. It seemed to be night and day, and it became too much. A friend of mine, a craftsman, took it on, Tammy, and he built it up, which was a good thing. In between that and '95, I was asked by the Shetland Flock Book Society if I could judge their wool on the hoof. And there's your Shetland Rams. It was their annual show and sale, and I really enjoyed this. It was held at the local mart, and my first judging, I knew very little about the live wool on a live animal. A big Shetland Ram I thought would be a bit of a handful. I'd worked at Berry Farm part-time for the Smith family, but this was a challenge, and a couple of the old crofters advised me that first show, keep an eye on that one. And I went in and I took their advice and I learned from them. The crofters are the people to learn from for their wool. So around about 1997, we had a major boost to the natural wools in Shetland. There was very little demand for the native coloured sheep. The wool was really, the wool mills would tack it and dye it. They preferred to have a dyed wool. They'd tack white and dye it into natural shades. And it was through '97, this lady and her husband came in here. She wanted to know what happened to the coloured wool. And I said, well, basically, we couldn't get rid of it. It was really, except for hand spinners, nothing really happened. She said she would do something about it. And 2 or 3 months later, she came back. Her name was Betty Lindsay from Bethesda in Maryland, and I cared a sheep saver. She wanted to have undyed, natural. And it's as if it had come off the sheep. She wanted the Shetland names for it, and I got a crofter to match up the names. And so in '97, we launched, and Betty's name was Shetland 2000. And this really was a turning point for the natural wools. Up until that point, there was very little interest in it. After that, every Tom, Dick and Harry wanted to get in on the act. It was a very environmentally friendly yarn, and it was met with a lot of support around the world. And it was something that Nowadays we have a different name for it at Jamieson Smith. I think it's Shetland Supreme, but Shetland 2000 is a special place in my memory. And Betty, she was the pioneer of this. In 1999, we were approached by a local businessman, and he wished us to be part of launching Shetland wool Shetland products. He wanted us to feature Shetland wool, and this consisted of a website that was made up by a friend of mine. So in '99 we launched our first website. My employers weren't too happy about this. People said it was come far too early, but we were inundated with orders for this. It was a turning point for this company, and I say it was unbelievably popular. '99 was a very significant part for this company. It changed this company forevermore. It just made a different company, that the marketplace opened up, and it was a local businessman that approached us if we could put a website into place, Jamieson Smith Shetland Wool Brokers, and this was one of the first websites in Shetland, perhaps even in Scotland. I was told it was too early, but I listened to this local businessman and his technician, and with the help of a local man, we created our first website. This opened up Shetland wool to the world, and that was massive for this company. So in 2001, another very significant part, one of our customers that we sold Shetland wool to, he wanted to do an eco-friendly promotion for one of his customers in Japan that he sold the finest quality Shetland to, and he wanted like an environmentally friendly yarn from a wool that was in it, hadn't been touched by fertiliser or what have you. It's a difficult choice. I was told I had to pick out a club from then days was about 1,000 crofters and farmers. I chose Papa, the island of Papa, who belonged to my employers, Jim and Eva Smith at Berry Farm. And what we did there, we went in, the young chap, he did a piece and he launched it in, I think it was in 2001. So that was a great, another great boost for the Hill Shetland wool. In 2004, we decided to take our products. We had a lot of the Shetland woolen spun at that time, to the first trade show that we attended, and that was at Harrogate. Myself and one of the ladies in the shop, we went down to Harrogate and we met the people, and a lot of them were customers who'd originally ordered from here way back in the day at the start, and it was great to meet these people. Now, one of the things that came out of that was very important. I wished to take fleece down with me in 2004, but there was some outbreak, I forget what it was. We couldn't take fleece. It could have been a disease on the mainland because there's no Shetland sheep disease in Shetland. And this lady in Harrogate, elderly lady, a spinner, said, why don't you do comb tops? And the comb tops was something, again, that was it was a focal point for this company turning around. It was one of the key factors in this company's history. So in 2005, we had a major shock, personally a major shock to the system. Jamieson Smith decided to retire. I think he was about coming up to 80. She was probably through her 70s. They decided to retire and look after their 2 farms. They sold the company to the main buyers of the Shetland wool clip, and that was a company called Curtis Wool Direct, based in Bradford. And they had taken over the mantle, the role of the major wool buyer with the demise of Hunters of Barora, who sadly departed in the first of the 2000s. So in 2005, new owners were in place, and they instructed me, along with Jamieson, that I was now to become the general manager and the managing director. And I certainly was very unsettled and unsure about this. To start with, very little knowledge in running a business, but we had a bit of support from the parent company and the past owners and the staff here. We advanced on a new era. At that time, we started to stock comb tops. For people that don't know, comb tops is for the worsted process. It's combed, it's not woolen spun, it's the worsted process. It's something that a lot of hand spinners want it. And you can see this is the Supreme Shetland. This actually helped improve the price on the natural Shetland, and it was a significant development to this company. So in 2005, I was instructed that the wool price was at the bottom. We needed to turn the company around, and what the new owners wished to do was to create product from the Shetland wool, not just the fine, right through to the lower grades. A very significant thing took place in 2006, and this, to me personally, was the turning point for this company in a lot of ways. It was a friend of mine who's the textile curator of the Shetland Museum, Carl Christensen, approached me about the Gunnister Man. He was discovered, his remains, his clothes was discovered in a peat bog in the north of Shetland. He dated from about 1700, and Carl Christensen wanted to try and provide wool that could make his clothes. So in 2006, Derek and myself attended the launch of the Gunnister Man, and it's as if he'd been recreated. He's still on show in the museum, but when I stood back and looked at the crowds of people attending that, working with the museum, we are working with the public. It was the way to try and develop Jamieson Smith and Shetland wool, and so that Gunnister Man was responsible for a lot that was to follow. In 2006, I was invited to Woolfest. It was the very first Woolfest. And I'll never forget the day that we loaded up a vehicle belonging to my brother-in-law who owns garages. My wife was to drive us down to the north of England to Woolfest. We took out the seats, we filled the vehicle full of our product, fleece, wool, yarn, everything we could pack in. I was told it would take 6.5 hours to drive down from Aberdeen. We went on the boat, and we were in Cumbria in 4 hours. Catherine still doesn't believe me, but it was quite a rundown for somebody that's not a good traveller. Woolfest again opened up another avenue for this company to take Shetland wool and their products out with the islands. I was invited by a professor to talk at Glasgow University, and this was a textile audience, and what she asked me at the end of this talk was if I would go on the university tour. I was quite good fee I would receive, accommodation paid for, etc. When I got back home and wished to do this, Catherine says, no, I think they'll just stay where they is. So anyhow, we got a lot more trade out of this talks. We were at Stirling University, we are product there. In 2008, another very significant part that our history, our textile history, it took place. The chap that was running the Shetland Amenity Trust, the late Jamie McReef, approached me. I'd never met him before. He said he'd been in Tamil Nadu, the coast of India, as a volunteer after the tsunami. He'd seen a video of a lady trying to get the poor people to recreate silk, handmade silk. I saw the video and I said, yes, it's very interesting. What do you wish of me? He says, well, you have comb tops. I wish you to recreate worsted. And I said, worsted, we have worsted. We have worsted. He says, no, you have woolen spun. I want worsted, the old-fashioned worsted, which was worsted. All my young life, my mum was a knitter. I would help when she hanked. I would have to hold out the hank while she rolled it into a ball. It was always called worsted. Jimmy said, no, we need it to match up to our museum collection. It's a single ply worsted. And I said, well, I don't know much about this. He says, you have to comb tops and we need worsted. I approached the parent company and put the idea to them, and we had the Shetland comb tops, and I think in the Yorkshire area perhaps there was 2 spinners left. It was a dying art, worsted spinning. We were fortunate. We ended up after a lot of trials. We had 2 local women, Mary Kay and Mary Junson, and they knit it with it. And we can see it here. We did it in 5 shades, the naturals and the ecru, the white. 2 of the comments that they made, Mary Junson said that, boy, it's as thin as the hair on your head. A normal knitter, I couldn't work with this. It was very, very thin and it was very strong. Worsted yarn is strong and it's leaner as the woolen spun lace. Woolen spun lace needs a bit of strength, so there's usually an Australasian type wool added to that, to grade 1 Shetland. But this was 100% real Shetland. I put my request through to the parent company. I was told we needed an international audience comments on this and what to do next. I approached a friend of mine, Myrna Stammen, lace knitter, complete fanatic in Shetland wool, an author of knitting, and she had knitting retreats. She had 50 knitters, She did a survey for us on this yarn, which she didn't divulge what it was. And because of long story short, I got the 50 surveys, sent it off to the parent company, and the next day there was no comment. It had jammed my computer, but the next day I was given the green light to go ahead with this project. In 2008, we started this. In 2010, we were to launch, along with the museum, we were to launch this project. And the project consisted of Shetland ladies taking the yarn and making it into stoles and scarves. And we were to launch it at Christmas 2010. Another very important factor and a defining part of not only Jamieson and Smith, but Shetland crofters, Shetland knitters, and not just the general wider public in Shetland, the businesses, took place in 2010. In September 2010, I had a month to create Shetland Wool Week. My employers wished a Shetland Wool Week to take place, and we had a month on the mainland and throughout the world. The campaign for wool was trying to improve the status of wool as an important garment, whatever. The patron was HRH, Prince Charles, and how to do this. Shetland, in my time, the Shetland textile trade was, it could be a bit fractured at times. It could be individuals on their own rather as being united. How to get everybody together. I phoned a friend of mine that ran the Shetland Flop book. He was the secretary. I put it to him that this was an ideal opportunity when I judged the Shetland Ram at their annual show and sale, that we create Shetland Wool Week around the Ram sale. He said, it's a brilliant idea, go for it. The next morning I approached the late Jimmy McReef at the Shetland Amenity Trust, and I said, would there be any way of them getting involved? And he said, what do you want? And I said, could we launch the Shetland List project as the forerunner for Shetland Wool Week? Thanks to him and his staff at Shetland Amenity Trust and Museum and Archives, I'm very pleased to say it was launched in 2010. And since then, it's never really looked back. 2011, due to the fact that it was a major operation, we didn't have the staff here. In 2011, the Shetland Amenity Trust and Promote Shetland took on the running of Shetland Wool Week. Over a very short period of time, 2 or 3 years, they got everyone involved from uns to Sombra in Shetland Wool Week. Shetland Wool Week has been massive. It has been a complete change. Crofters, instead of saying to me when they came in with their wool, instead of complaining and saying, you're doing nothing about this wool, they came in and they would say, boy, it's a good idea, a Shetland Wool Week. And that's praise enough. 2011, we did our first book, A Knit Real Shetland Stories. A storybook appeared a bit later on with Amenity Trust and Vispring. Vispring were a very important part of this company. They handmade beds. They were based in the south of England, right down at the very bottom, and they wished Shetland wool to be in their handmade beds. So they sponsored the Shetland Flockbook Society, and they became one of the main buyers of Shetland wool. They put up in 2011 for the Shetland Storybook, they put up a prize worth thousands of a handmade Shetland bed. A local crofter who sells his wool to us, he actually won that with his story about his grandparents and how they croft it. So again, developments that is improving the price of Shetland wool. In 2011, we seem to be getting so many different products and ideas. It's as if Shetland Wool Week had opened up another chapter. The new employer, they seem pleased enough. 2012, I was approached by, again, my friend Carol Christensen. What she wished to do was recreate Worset again, but this time it was Worset dyed. It was a jumper yarn. It was their collection in the museum that went back over 100 years of garments. What we were to do, we were to try and replicate that yarn. I remember going up to the museum and store, and we took photos of the yarn. I asked for a garment. She said, no, it's in our collection. I asked for a thread off one of the jumpers. No, you've got to guess the weight. I guessed the weight on the old gala count, 222.5 cut. I sent it off to the parent company, and thankfully somebody in the Worset mill knew what a 222.5 cut was. After a few months, perhaps 6 months, we were able to present, if my memory's right, 9 shades, and that really pleased the museum people. And so this was another way of us going back in the past and bringing forward one of the strengths of Shetland textiles. We already had the Shetland 2000 in jumper weight. Shetland knitters, historically, we hunters of Brora, always had a yarn called a hat yarn. Sadly, that died out with hunters of Brora in the late 1980s. And we saw the heritage yarn was quite close to the old hat yarn. We again put it to our employers, could we have a hat yarn? And I'm very pleased to say that they agreed to do this. We did it in the 5 natural shades, and this design here was knitted by Sandra, and this that works in the shop, and this is the hat yarn, a beautiful handle. So that's recreating something for the past. 2013, 2014, another major change took place, and this time, personally, it was a serious health issue. I came down with bowel cancer, and this was quite a devastating time in my life. It was with a lot of support from my wife, my family, my surgeon, Macmillan nurses. I came through it, and when I went home, I was able to do very little. I actually saw a glimpse into the past, and it was my old boss, Jim Smith, Berry Farm. He'd been asked by the Royal Bank if he could write a piece for a case study on their dad's companies, and that was my old boss, John Sheepy Smith. I started from a bed to write this story, and it came from the heart, and I realised that Jim had passed away. Eva was getting quite frail and elderly. A lot of this history could pass. So I started with my laptop. I would hide it when my wife would appear in the bedroom to write the story. From Eva supplied me with material, but my own stories, as I'm telling you in this film. I'm very pleased to say that the parent company agreed to do my story, but a condensed story. Ella, Sandra and Derek, they added in, I think it was 10 designs. The history was a potted history, but it tells the story of Barry Farham, John Sheepy Smith, who started this company off and started trading in wool in the 1930s. So this book was a personal journey and an unbelievable help to me at a very dark time in my life. Also, at that time, I was very fortunate to be part of Uphellia. And Uphellia is a fire festival that's the largest fire festival, I believe, in Europe, where the main squad, the Jarl squad, we rig out as Vikings. There's about 1,000 guys, as the rest of the squads go out as topics of interest at that time, whatever they may be. I'll never forget our Jarl when he first showed me his suit, and there was 50 geysers in the galley shade, and his kirtle. I asked him the kirtle, and you can see the kirtle here. This is what the Viking wore. Possibly the only thing of that suit that a Viking would have worn when he visited Shetland in the 8th and 9th century. But I asked him what was the yarn that was in his kirtle. He said Australian lamb's wool. And I immediately responded to that and said, no way am I wearing that. And he looked at me and he quite simply said, do something about it. We were working, as I said previous, with the museum on the heritage yarn. It was very easy to get my employer to do a black for the kirtle. I just sent him a link to Shetland's Uphellia page, and the rest is history, and we got our kirtle. And this is not woolen spun, it's worsted. It was done at the local Shetland Textile College, and that will wear forevermore. Such is the strength of the worsted yarn. So in 2015, I was tasked with another project, and this was to help, again, market Shetland sheep, Shetland wool. I was told that one of the customers of our parent company was employing a photojournalist to travel the world in search of the world's finest wools. The parent company wished Shetland to be in this book, and I was to do it. I didn't have a lot of time, but I was to get Shetland in this book. Again, like Wool Week, how do you do this? You simply approach the crofter, the farmer, and I approached 5 or 6 of them, and I'm very proud to say we achieved the aim. We launched this I think it was 2015, and there's your old wool man. And we have in here the Shetland sheep. And this book is very significant, very personal to me, because in this book we have from Pakistan, we have from the muskox, from Greenland, we have Mongolia, Australia, New Zealand, Merino, South Africa, 8 countries, Shetland, and in this book they say Scotland, Shetland. There isn't another British breed in here, there isn't even another European breed in here, and that's where I rest my case. Shetland is at the top of the tree. In 2015 I came back to work. I sort of eased back on my workload and I took on part-time, and I eventually came down to 2 days a week. It's a very physical job. I passed on the reins to Derek Gowdy along with the young people here. They've developed the company. So I didn't completely take a back seat. When approaching my old boss, Eva Smith, who now was well through her 80s, I said, I'm thinking about retiring. She looked at me from a resting chair. She says, boy, people like us don't retire. We just fade away. I wouldn't like to say I'm fading away, but I've taken it a bit more easy. I'm enjoying my life with hill walks with my wife and walking our dog, photography, whatever. And I thought I was actually drifting off into the background. 2019, Shetland Amenity Trust organisers, the Shetland Wool Week, asked me to be patron of Shetland Wool Week. Quite an undertaking, as all previous patrons had been well-known designers. Kate Davis, Ella Gordon, just to mention a few, Hazel Tyndall. I felt I didn't really fit into this, and they said, the Amenity Trust lady said, you were the originator of Shetland Wool Week. I said, no, it was HRH, Prince Charles, and my employer at Curtis Wool. Well, she says, we wish you to be patron. You need to do a design for a beanie. And I said, well, what do I do? She says, well, you talk about your life. Why don't you use your life? I come from a small island called Burra. My dad was a crofter fisherman. That's his boat, the Dauntless, and that's his sheep. So that's the roadside beanie where I lived on my grandfather's croft for the first 5 years of my life. So this was designed by Sandra Manson, and I'm very pleased to say that it seemed to go down well. It's my story in a beanie. Patron of Wool Week, there's so much that came out of that. It was a fantastic experience. It was unbelievable at the opening night in Clickamin Centre. Hundreds of people from all around. I stood up on the stage. I normally can talk the hind legs off of a donkey, and I completely froze. I saw nothing but beanies. And I introduced a video, a film on the big screen of the man that kicked off Shetland Wool Week and Wool Weeks around the world, HRH, Prince Charles. All in all, Shetland Wool Week has been a huge boost to the textile industry, but also to Shetland in general. All sorts, taxis, hotels, whatever. Shetland Wool Week has been one of the focal points of my time in wool. I'm very pleased to say that the young people that have taken over from me, they're still developing the products. They're moving more into manufacturing, making Shetland jumpers. We have a company in Yorkshire, West Yorkshire Spinners. We sort the Shetland wool from them, and they have their own brand of yarn called Croft yarn, which is nothing but the finest Shetland. So we're still moving ahead. We've had this unfortunate pandemic, which is thrown things out of kilter. And one of the highlights of my working life is now seeing an addition to this company, a new extension to this company. It's a long time coming. It was 1969 that my old manager wished to have an extension to this business. And as they say, you wait a long time sometimes. So it's been a long time coming, boy, but it's finally here. We need to get it furnished, and we have education rooms and a lot more space in the shop to show off all these brilliant products. So I'm now entering my 54th year. I'm very pleased to say I'm still going strong. I hope to be around for a few more years, as long as the younger people here can put up with me. And I'd just like to thank you for listening to me, and you can view our previous video films online. Thank you.